You probably think you know Jackie Kennedy, right? The glamorous First Lady. The style icon with the big sunglasses and pearls. The grieving widow in that unforgettable pink suit. She's someone who almost feels untouchable, like a figure carved into American history. But here's the thing, sometimes the stories we think we know are only part of the truth. Because a new book just dropped a revelation that's shocking a lot of people. It suggests that Jackie Kennedy, yes, that Jackie, may have had a secret, very personal connection with Robert McNamara. And if the name doesn't ring a bell right away, let me paint a picture. Robert McNamara wasn't just another politician or a friend from Washington. He was the Secretary of Defense. One of the most powerful men in the world at that time. A man right in the middle of Cold War tension, nuclear fears, and eventually, the decisions that shaped the Vietnam War. Now, when you put those two names together, Jackie Kennedy and Robert McNamara, it feels almost surreal, doesn't it?
Jacqueline Kennedy never wrote a memoir, but now more than 8 hours of a recorded interview that she did nearly 6 months after her husband was assassinated gives the world an entirely new perspective on the former First Lady. In these interviews, she speaks candidly about her husband, the president, and his private thoughts on some of the powerful historical figures of the time. It was only months after her husband's assassination when a 34-year-old widow sat down to record more than 8 hours of recollections about her husband and his most private thoughts, while they were still fresh, even raw. JFK and his brother Bobby on Lyndon Johnson, the new president.
Bobby told me this later, and I know Jack said it to me sometimes. He said, "Oh God, can you ever imagine what would happen to the country if Lyndon was president?" So many times he'd say it, or if there was ever a problem.
On the day her husband was buried, the former First Lady had written to thank LBJ for all his kindness, calling him, quote, Jack's right arm. And more than that, we were friends, all four of us. Almost a half-century later, we hear a different view, perhaps colored by Bobby Kennedy's resentments after the assassination, and her annoyance after this call from Johnson a month after her husband's death, 2 days before Christmas.
I hope that you are doing all right.
Oh, I'm doing fine, thank you.
You know how much we love you. You have a good Christmas, dear.
Thank you, the same to you.
Good night.
Hours later, Jackie learned LBJ was in fact showing off for a room full of reporters. Just as stunning are criticisms of the leader of the civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but they need to be understood in context. At the time, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was trying to incite divisions between the Kennedys and Dr. King by telling Bobby Kennedy that Dr. King was overheard on FBI wiretaps making crude comments about Jackie Kennedy, kissing her husband's coffin on the day of Jack's funeral. The tapes were supposed to be locked in a vault for a century, but Caroline Kennedy decided to release them now, all 8.5 hours, uncensored, because she felt you don't change someone else's oral history. She also explained it isn't surprising her mother would have, at the time, made some statements she might have changed later. As Caroline told Parade, when she first read the transcript shortly after her mother died, they reminded her that her mother felt what made historical figures human was what made them more interesting. And indeed, emerging from this oral history is a very different Jacqueline Kennedy. Not the long familiar public figure whose whispery voice guided us through the White House.
It just seemed to me such a shame when we came here to find hardly anything of the past in the house.
Or the fashion icon whom the president joked he accompanied to Paris.
I am the man who accompanied Jacqueline Kennedy to Paris, and I've enjoyed it.
This Jacqueline Kennedy is far more complex, with a keen eye for the characters around her husband, and a feel for diplomacy and politics.
I mean, in politics, things do change so quickly, and Jack would never, he'd often say that, never get in anything so deep that you've lost all chance of conciliation.
Two worlds colliding. A First Lady known for her elegance, and a Defense Secretary known for his sharp mind and hard decisions. But according to this book, their connection wasn't just professional or casual. It was deep. Maybe even romantic. And when you start to look at it closely, it makes a lot of sense. So let's rewind for a second. Jackie Kennedy. We see her as this perfect figure. Perfect hair, perfect style, always smiling in public. But the truth is, her private life was far from perfect. Her marriage to John F. Kennedy wasn't exactly a fairy tale. JFK was famously unfaithful. Jackie knew it. The world whispered about it. And after JFK's tragic assassination, she was left not just heartbroken, but vulnerable. Imagine that for a moment. You lose your husband, the President of the United States, in front of the whole world. You're young. You're raising 2 children. And you're expected to stay graceful, calm, and composed while millions of eyes are watching. That's a heavy weight to carry. And now, let's bring Robert McNamara into this. He wasn't just some random politician floating around Washington. He was smart, calculated, charismatic in his own way. Before politics, he had a background in business. He ran Ford Motor Company. But when JFK became president, he pulled McNamara in to serve as his Secretary of Defense. This man was at the center of decisions that could literally change the fate of the world. Think Cuban Missile Crisis, nuclear negotiations, Cold War strife. Now, here's where it gets really fascinating. Some people who've studied Jackie's life have long suspected she had more than one secret relationship after JFK's death. And honestly, can we blame her? She was lonely. She was looking for comfort, stability, someone who understood the chaos of political life. And who better than Robert McNamara? He had been right there in the middle of Kennedy's presidency. He understood the pressure, the danger, the constant scrutiny. Out of everyone, he was one of the few people who got it. But here's the catch. Was this actually an affair? Or was it something else? That's the big debate. Some sources call it an affair, suggesting romance. Others insist it was more about emotional connection than physical intimacy. And when you think about it, sometimes emotional bonds are even more powerful. Because let's be real, sharing your deepest thoughts, your fears, your secrets, that can connect 2 people in a way that a casual fling never could. So let's pause for a second and really talk about Jackie. We've all seen the photos. The iconic pink Chanel suit. The pillbox hats. The big sunglasses hiding her eyes. To the world, she looked flawless. Calm. Almost untouchable. But in reality? Jackie Kennedy wasn't just sitting quietly in the background after JFK was gone. No, she was a lot more complex than that. She was strategic. Careful. Intentional about the choices she made. After John's death, Jackie didn't just drift through life. She thought hard about who she let close to her. She understood that every person around her mattered, because in her world, relationships weren't just friendships, they were survival. Historians often point out something fascinating about Jackie. She had a talent for building connections with powerful men. Now, before you jump to conclusions, it wasn't always about romance. Sometimes it was about protection. Sometimes about security. Sometimes about finding someone who could help her navigate a world that wasn't exactly friendly to women left on their own. Think about her situation for a second. She had just lost her husband, the President of the United States, in the most public and traumatic way possible. She lost not only the man she married but also the foundation of her safety. The White House, the political backing, the bubble of security that came with being First Lady, that was gone. And suddenly, she was exposed. Vulnerable. With 2 children to raise in the spotlight of the world. Can you imagine that? You're only in your 30s, and you've already lived through a nightmare most of us couldn't even begin to picture. On top of that, you're expected to smile, to represent dignity, to carry yourself as Jackie Kennedy, a living symbol of America. But behind the curtain, that's why Jackie didn't let just anyone into her circle. She needed people she could trust. Allies. Protectors. Guides who understood her world. And Robert McNamara fit that role better than almost anyone else. Now let's flip the story and look at McNamara himself. Here was a man carrying his own heavy burden. The Vietnam War had his name written all over it. Decisions he made, or was forced to make, shaped the lives of millions. And people didn't exactly treat him kindly for it. He was criticized, blamed, even hated in some circles. But the thing is, McNamara wasn't a monster. People close to him said he carried a tremendous amount of guilt. He felt the weight of lives lost. The speeches he gave in public were filled with confidence, but in private, he wrestled with doubts. Regret. Questions about whether he had done the right thing. And here's where Jackie comes in. For McNamara, Jackie might have been more than just a beautiful, iconic woman. She might have been a safe space. Someone who wasn't a fellow politician. Someone who wasn't in the Pentagon war room. Someone who could listen, without judgment, and simply understand. Jackie had empathy. Intelligence. A quiet strength that people often overlooked because of her fashion and beauty. To McNamara, talking to her could have been like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. And for Jackie, having someone like McNamara in her life might have felt grounding. A reminder that she wasn't entirely alone in carrying impossible burdens. Now, can you picture the two of them? Both guarded in public. Both polished, careful, measured in everything they said. Always aware of who was watching. And yet, behind closed doors, in the quiet of private conversations, they could drop the masks. Two people under enormous pressure. Two people carrying grief, guilt, and expectations no one else could fully understand. Doesn't it almost feel like a movie plot? The First Lady and the Defense Secretary, finding comfort in each other when the cameras are gone. Only, this isn't Hollywood fiction. This was real life. So the question remains, what exactly was it between them? Was it love? Was it strategy? Was it simply two broken souls leaning on each other during a time of chaos? That's the mystery that keeps historians talking. And maybe we'll never know the exact answer. But here's something I think we can all agree on. Stories like this remind us that even the most iconic figures in history are human. Jackie Kennedy wasn't just the perfect First Lady smiling on magazine covers. She wasn't just the woman walking with grace during JFK's funeral. She was complicated. She had needs. She had emotions. She had secrets. And McNamara, well, he wasn't just the man behind the war strategy. He, too, had vulnerabilities that the world never saw. And this is where I want to pause and bring it back to you for a moment. Have you ever had a relationship that was hard to explain to others? Not necessarily romantic. Maybe it was a friendship. Maybe it was someone who just got you when no one else did. The kind of bond where you don't need to explain every detail because that person already understands. That's the kind of connection Jackie and McNamara might have shared. It wasn't necessarily about passion or scandal. It could have been about survival. About comfort. About finally having someone in your corner who didn't need the full backstory to know what you were going through. And that makes me wonder, what would you have done if you were Jackie? Put yourself in her shoes for a second. You've lost the love of your life in the most public way possible. The world is watching your every move. You're raising two kids who need stability. You're lonely. Heartbroken. Overwhelmed. And then, here comes someone like McNamara. Strong. Smart. Familiar with your world. Someone who isn't afraid of your pain because he's carrying his own. Would you have leaned on him? Would you have allowed that closeness, even if it blurred lines? Honestly, I think many of us would have. Because at the end of the day, we're all just human. We all crave connection. Especially when the world feels like it's collapsing around us. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Jackie Kennedy wasn't a statue. She wasn't a perfect painting. She was a woman trying to survive in a world that often felt unbearable. And McNamara? He wasn't just a political figure. He was a man trying to carry the weight of history while looking for someone who could see him as more than a job title. So yes, whether it was love, or friendship, or something in between, this story reshapes how we see Jackie Kennedy. She wasn't just Jackie the icon. She was Jackie the human being. With flaws. With needs. With a heart that sometimes looked for comfort in unexpected places. And maybe that's what makes her story even more powerful. Because let's be honest, we've all seen those picture-perfect images of her. The glamorous gowns. The White House tours. The carefully posed family photos. But behind every smile, there's always a story we don't see. And sometimes, those hidden stories change everything we thought we knew. So, what do you think? Do you believe Jackie and McNamara were truly in love? Or was this simply a deep friendship, misunderstood by outsiders? Maybe the truth lives somewhere in the middle. Drop your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to know your perspective. And if this story fascinated you as much as it fascinated me, you've got to check out my other video about Jackie Kennedy's life after JFK. Because trust me, that chapter is just as dramatic, just as full of twists, and just as human. Before you click away, though, do me a quick favor. If you enjoyed this, give the video a like, it really helps more people discover these untold stories. And if you want more conversations like this, where we peel back the polished layers of history, make sure you subscribe. And hey, if you have a friend who's obsessed with the Kennedy era, share this with them. Because stories like this are too good to keep to ourselves. At the end of the day, Jackie Kennedy's life was so much more than the perfect pictures in magazines. And sometimes, it's the hidden, messy, complicated stories that teach us the most, not just about her, but about what it means to be human.